أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على ثم الصلاة والسلام على آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من يوم عداوتهم إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتابه وهو أصدق القائلين: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ما أصاب من مصيبة في الأرض ولا في أنفسكم إلا في كتاب من قبل أن نبرأها إن ذلك على الله يسير لكي لا تعصوا على ما فاتكم ولا تفرحوا بما آتاكم والله لا يحب كل مختال فخور. صلوات على محمد. Every human being, every intelligent, conscious human being, at some point in their lives asks the question, what is the purpose of life? And this question comes to the forefront when humans encounter loss or suffering. For the longest of times, I held the opinion that every single human being has a unique purpose for which he or she is created on this earth. And this is an idea that many of you may also have or have had. It is fueled by many factors, including what we constantly hear in the media that says, go out and find your purpose in life, that you are your own unique individual human being who was created for a purpose. And we see a lot of slogans, a lot of posters, a lot of messaging in this vein to say you have a purpose and that your task in life, for the first phase at least, is to find this purpose in life. And so I've held this belief for a long time. And I have argued this view using Quran and Hadith. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, in Surah Al-Mu'minun, which is chapter 23 of the Quran, verse 115, He says, أَفَحَسِبْتُمْ أَنَّمَا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ عَبَثًا. Do you imagine, or do you suppose, or do you think that we created you in vain and without a purpose, just frivolously, عَبَثًا, وَأَنَّكُمْ إِلَيْنَا لَا تُرْجَعُونَ, and that you shall not return to us one day. So I have used this verse to argue that Allah Himself is saying, do you think I created you without a purpose? But then when I began to look around, what I found is that most humans leave this world without fulfilling any specific purpose. Most humans come to this world as children, grow up, go to school, go to university, find a job, find a spouse, get married, buy a home, have children of their own, work. Just as animals rise every morning and go out foraging for food and then return to their watering holes in the evenings, we sit in traffic in the morning going looking for food, and then sit in traffic again and come back home. But ask yourself, your parents, your grandparents, your uncles, your aunts, look around, your community, your workplace, the people you know, the multitude of human beings. Do you think they all have a specific, unique purpose we may be able to identify a very great, unique purpose for specific individuals. If we speak of those who are infallible, we might say, for example, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was born for a special purpose. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And that he had, a mission for which he was born and created. Or if we speak of those who are not infallible, we might think of examples and say, Ayatollah Khomeini, for example. But for the vast majority, including our own lives, we cannot speak of any glorious purpose. So this leaves us with a conundrum now. On one hand, Allah is saying, the proof that I am wise, that I am Al-Hakim, is that I don't do anything without a purpose. And He is categorically saying, أَفَحَسِبْتُمْ أَنَّمَا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ عَبَثًا. Do you think I created you without a purpose? But on the other hand, the vast majority of humans don't seem to have a purpose. Does it mean that his objective, wal-'iyadhu billah, has failed? That is not possible. So as I began reflecting on this further, I came to a realization of where I misunderstood the verse. Yes, Allah is all-wise, and He created humans with a purpose. But that purpose is not individual. That purpose is collective. It is universal. There is one underlying primary purpose for which He created all of humanity, and by extension, all of creation. And this one purpose is so that the soul, which is the real you, not the physical shell that houses this soul, that this soul that comes into this world as an infant or in its raw form, that it may take shape and mature, that it may attain spiritual maturity. Just as we speak of physical maturity, that a child grows up and attains bulugh, or we speak of intellectual maturity, or we speak of emotional maturity, we speak of the soul's spiritual maturity. And this spiritual maturity manifests itself with a knowing and a realization of who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. The more spiritually mature a soul is, the more it is conscious of its creator, and the less it is conscious of its own self. And by that measure, one can place every soul as to what level of maturity it has attained. And as I develop this, you will see that the underlying message here is that humanity is created in multitude, but all souls are undergoing a journey, a spiritual journey. And the end of the journey, which has no end, is to come to greater consciousness and awakening and realization of one's creator. It is not just a physical form of awakening. I will discuss this a little further and say, what do we mean by maturity or spiritual maturity, and what is it that we mean by knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The word maturity can mislead us. When I speak of spiritual maturity, we might assume that someone who has spent an extensive amount of time worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or someone who is intellectually and emotionally mature. There is some truth to this, and it all comes out in a mix. But when I speak of spiritual maturity, I'm not speaking purely in the physical, intellectual, or emotional sense. Why? There are many individuals who have attained a ripe old age, but when you interact with them, you realize that they have not really understood what religion is all about. They might pray a lot of salat, they might spend a lot of nights in ibadah, they might recite a lot of Quran, they might fast a lot of fasts, mustahab as well as, the obligatory. But when you speak to them, you find there is no depth and understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or religion. You will find on one hand there is excessive dua and ibadah and salatul layl and fasting, But on the other hand, that same individual is filled with envy and jealousy and hatred and backbiting and lying. And you come to this realization that there is religiosity, but there is no spiritual maturity. Intellectual maturity, you might encounter an individual who has multiple PhDs, but he's an atheist. He doesn't believe in God. He is mature intellectually, but not spiritually in the sense that we speak. That is why when someone asked Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, what is intellect? What is aql? The Imam defined aql by saying, مَا عُبِدَ بِهِ الرَّحْمَنِ وَاقْتُصِبَ بِهِ الْجِنَانِ. Aql or intellect is that by which one comes to worship one's creator, and aql is that by which one earns one's place in paradise. Meaning, if you, with all your learnings and all your experiences, cannot come to the conclusion that I have a creator before whom I must bow, and you are not able to find a place in Jannah, then you have no aql, you have jahala. It doesn't matter how many PhDs you have pasted on the wall. So spiritual maturity is something else. When we speak of spiritual maturity, we speak of a submission to one's creator, where there is a diminishing of the egoic self and a greater awareness and consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and of knowing Him. So what we have said so far is that Allah is wise. He does not act without purpose. He created human beings for a purpose. The purpose is for these humans to mature, and that maturity manifests itself by them knowing Him. So now the question is, how do you know Allah, and what does it mean to know Allah? Knowing Allah is not through the mind or ratiocination or just using a mental process or activity to know Him, because He cannot be known that way. And the Quran, we cannot go into this in the interest of time, but you will find that the Quran is replete with examples where it speaks of the heart being blind and not the mind. Allah also mentions many places in the Quran about coming to Him and meeting Him or attaining proximity to Him. And by doing so, you get to know Him. The question is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not in a fixed location. So how do we come to know Him, and how do we come close to Him? Consider, for example, every act of worship. Islam requires us, it is a prerequisite that any act of worship has to have an intention, and that intention has to be qurbatan ilallah. If it is not qurbatan ilallah, it is not accepted. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it is wudu, salat, hajj, even charity, anything you do, mustahab, wajib, if it is not qurbatan ilallah, it is rejected. What does qurbatan ilallah mean? Seeking nearness to Allah. How do you seek nearness to one who is already closer to you than your jugular vein? وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ. He is closer to you than whatever can be closest to you. How do you get closer to Him? Therefore, qurbatan ilallah is not a movement in time or space, but qurbatan ilallah is a movement in consciousness and awareness and knowing Allah. In Surah Al-Inshiqaq, He says, Ya ayyuhal insan, innaka kadihun ila rabbika kadhan famulaqih. O human being, you are constantly toiling and struggling. You're not conscious of it, but you are. You are constantly toiling and struggling towards your sustainer with a severe toiling. And you will meet Him. فَمُلَاقِيهِ. How does this liqa Allah happen? In Surah Al-Kahf, He says, فَمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو لِقَاءَ اللَّهِ. So whoever hopes to meet Allah, to have this meeting with Allah, فَلْيَعْمَلْ عَمَلًا صَالِحًا وَلَا يُشْرِكْ بِعِبَادَةِ رَبِّهِ وَلَا يُشْرِكْ بِعِبَادَةِ رَبِّهِ أَحَدًا. Then let him act righteously and not associate anyone in the worship of his Lord. Whoever hopes to meet, to have this liqa Allah, how does this happen? Inna lillah, we belong to Allah. Wa inna ilayhi raji'un, and to him we are constantly returning. How are you returning to him when he's already with you? You are returning to him, meaning you are attaining greater consciousness of him. The greatest liqa, Kaaba qawsaini aw adna, when you come absolutely close to Allah, is not a physical meeting. It is a complete suspension of the egoic self and a full view of the radiance and full magnificence of the one and only reality that is our Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is coming to this full consciousness. Istajibu lillahi walirrasul idha da'akum lima yuhyikum. Answer the call and invitation of Allah and His Messenger when they invite you to that which will give you life. That means you are not alive right now. You are asleep. You are unconscious. When you attain full consciousness, that is when you come to life. That is when you wake up. An-nasu niyamun. Amirul Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, says, people are asleep. They are in this world. They're producing children, going to work, eating, sleeping, but it's like they're on a stretcher, they're being carried. They're asleep. An-nasu niyamun. Idha matu intabahu. When they die, they wake up. Why? Because when you die, the egoic self collapses. That sense of I, that false sense of I that your mind produced when you were born, it forcefully is snatched from you. What is painful about death is not the physical pain. It is losing that sense of I. So when you lose that, that's when you wake up and you realize there is only one reality, and it is so beautiful. So the purpose of life, when we say the purpose of life is to know Him and for the soul to mature, we mean it is to attain a state where we bask in the love of Allah, where we drown in His love, where instead of being this small egoic self that feels suffering is real and says, why did Allah create me and I suffer so much? We feel the warmth and tremendous love of a magnificent Lord, and we feel this deep sense of indebtedness and humility that He created us that we may feel this presence and love. That is why you see a mystic never asks, why did Allah create me? And now I suffer. Even this famous hadith, you know, the hadith of Kanzul Makhfiya, when we say, why did Allah create anything? And we say, Allah says, I was a hidden treasure. Hadith al-Qudsi, right? Kuntu kanzam makhfiya. I was a hidden treasure, and I wanted to be known. So I created a creation, likay u'araf, so that I may be known. Then we ask this question from our small egoic minds, why does Allah want to be known? He doesn't need anyone to know Him. He doesn't need fame. Was He bored? Was He lonely? Why did He create us so that we could know Him? No, my dear brothers and sisters. He created a creation so that He may be known is also a giving of His grace and love. It is His lutf. He wants to be known so that you can benefit from that and experience the love of knowing Him. The more you know Him, the more conscious you become of Him, the greater you feel His presence, and everything else then falls away in terms of what we define as physical suffering. And so there is a brilliant radiance that exudes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The most primary attribute that radiates from Allah is His love, His mahabbah, His rahmah, His lutf. And that is why we are told, sabaqat rahmatuhu ghadaba. His mercy overwhelms His wrath. His aim in creating creation, is to bring everyone to know Him. And that is why He wants everyone to succeed. And every soul is on a journey towards knowing Him. If you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So every incident that we experience in life, good or bad, is an opportunity for us to build certain traits in our souls that will help the soul to mature to a point where it willingly surrenders itself and experiences consciousness of God. Traits such as patience, courage, humility, selflessness. And that is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in one place in Surah Al-Baqarah, He says, Ista'inu bis-sabri was-salat. Seek help with patience and with prayer. Inna Allaha ma'as-sabirin. Allah is with those who are patient. And elsewhere in Surah Al-Baqarah, He says, Wasta'inu bis-sabri was-salat. Seek help with patience and prayer. وَإِنَّهَا لَكَبِيرَةٌ إِلَّا عَلَى الْخَاشِئِينَ. But this is very difficult to do, except on those who are humble. Because those who are humble are less egoic. It is they who will want patience and who will constantly turn to Allah and pray towards Him for this help. Patience is a primary attribute and trait of the soul that we need to strive for in order to build that maturity that will bring us to consciousness of God. When you look at this holistically in the Quran, you will find it is the single most important trait in a human soul. When the people of Jannah, of paradise, entered paradise, they are ushered in and they are welcomed by the angels. And the angels tell them, Salamun alaykum, peace be on you, as they enter Jannah. This is their abode where they shall live for all eternity. Salamun alaykum, peace be on you. Why? Because you prayed a lot of salat on the earth? No. Because you fasted a lot? No. Because you gave a lot of wealth in charity? No. Because you went for a lot of hajj and ziyarah? No. Salamun alaykum bima sabartum. Peace be on you because of the sabr you had when you were in the world. فَنِعْمَ أُقْبَ الدَّارِ. So how excellent is this eternal abode for you today? In other words, they are saying to them, peace be on you. Your patience has led you to a level of maturity where you are now so conscious of God that you can live for all eternity in bliss. Bima sabartum, فَنِعْمَ أُقْبَ الدَّارِ. So, in summarizing this, and I'm running out of time here, Allah is all-wise. He does not act without purpose. He created humans for a purpose. The purpose was for humans to know Him. In order to know Him, the soul needs to attain maturity. This knowing does not happen with the mind, but it happens through consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and knowing Him, feeling His presence and being fully conscious of Him, which leads us to submission. And this explains why Allah did not simply create us and plant us in Jannah. Because we need to have those interactions in this world that help us to build the attributes that help us to have these realizations and maturity that bring us to these levels of consciousness. Now, how do we build these traits? We build these traits in ourselves through one thing, and that one thing is suffering. Suffering happens in two ways. One way that suffering happens is through Sharia. Sharia imposes certain things on us in a very gentle manner, expose us to some hardship that build these traits in us. For example, Sharia tells us to wake up at dawn and pray Salatul Fajr. When we get up at that morning, we struggle against our souls, and in doing so, we build certain attributes and qualities that will help us to attain that God consciousness. Fasting, now that we are at the doorstep of the month of Ramadan. Fasting has been prescribed for you as it was prescribed for those before you. Why? لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, so that you may attain taqwa. What is taqwa? Taqwa is God consciousness. It brings us back to the same thing, that fasting also is to help you to become more conscious of Allah. Parting with your wealth is a hardship. Going for jihad is a hardship. These are all different forms of Sharia that give you some form of suffering but help nurturing the soul. The other way in which we encounter suffering is when we have to deal with other souls that are less mature than we are at our level. They may be our family members, parents, children, siblings, relatives, or they may be friends or people at work. as we encounter and deal with them, opportunities arise for us to build these qualities in our souls. We can choose to be patient or impatient. We can choose to be selfless or selfish. We can choose to be arrogant and angry or be humble. So we can choose to be courageous or we can be cowardly. There are constant challenges, from the person who annoys you in the traffic jam, to the person at work, to the person who says something hurtful at home. There is constant challenges, but that is why Islam does not permit you to go live in a cave